This is 2015. The racism that we have now is much more covert. When I was growing up, you knew. You didn't have to think about it. You knew. Places you didn't go. You know, you didn't go to certain movies. You didn't ride certain things. You knew. Today you expect it to be the opposite, but it's the same, but it's covert. It's the way people, it's the mixed messages that are given to you.
First and foremost, I do believe racism have different connotations. In the first place, I don't think racism existed until it was created. It's a creation for social control.
Racism, to me, is when individuals or groups of people aren't given opportunities or certain privileges that others are given as a result of their race.
Racism is a social construct. It is a belief or like I said 100 times, a system of certain races having more power over other races. Yeah, it's just simple. It's discriminating. It's being hateful. It's institutionalizing. It's marginalizing a group of people. It's all these bad things for a race or certain races or many races. Usually one race gets that privilege, and in America, it's white people.
I've been in a situation where I was walking with a friend on the street, and while walking with my partner, and we saw a friend talking to them on a street corner, and a man came by and slapped her ass. And then as soon as we got upset with him, he was calling us all kinds of derogatory things.
A lot of times in Chicago, I mean, mainly I experienced racism on two different levels by the cops, and they used to harass us regularly, throw us in jail, beat us up. And I also experienced racism in the community. The darker blacks would call me white, and it was an interesting dynamic because you don't really feel, when you're getting harassed by the police and you don't even feel welcome by your own community, it's kind of tough to develop that identity.
One time I came into Portland and I wanted to get a hamburger, and the guy wouldn't serve me right on Congress Street. So a week later, some of the young people who were staff at the camp, we drove back into town. Now, you know, you're talking about some people who were pretty big people. They were basketball players and football players from around the country. And we're all big. So 2 carloads, and we stopped at the same place. And one of the guys went in and asked, gentlemen, we're going to have fraps or milkshakes. And we won, 8 or 9 hamburgers. And I was with him, and the guy served us. Now, the person ordering the food was 6'7", 300 pounds. And he was white, and I don't think the guy would have wanted to deal with that. So, simply put. That happened, it didn't just happen there. Years later, state police just stopped me every time I came out of Dexter when I was coaching up there. Because I had a Country Squire, which is a Ford vehicle in those days. It was the high-end, car. I had Maryland plates on it because that's where I had come from, because I'd been teaching in Maryland. And everywhere I went, the first couple of years I was at Dexter, I got stopped every time I went on the turnpike.
Some of the prejudice is hugely geographical. And by that I mean on the peninsula, you have people who want to help, who want to be open-minded, who want to understand people from other cultures, as soon as you drive 10 miles away from the center of Portland, you run into really strong attitudes of being threatened by people of color or by refugees.
Racism, it's complicated, and you know, it's really embedded in our history, and right now with, you know, globalization and, you know, how interconnected everybody is today, we're able to engage people from different races and backgrounds, and kind of break through some of those barriers. I feel like institutionalized racism is really prevalent today, and that's moving forward. It's going to be dealing with those types of issues and those types of implicit bias to really get rid of racism.
The economics in this country are set in a way that people of color are the first ones fired. The hardest one, you don't get jobs. Forget all the affirmative action stuff that people talk about. Okay, that's just a cop out. That's the majority saying, oh, you don't deserve this. What do you mean we don't deserve this? You know, I got in line, I did my I did my time. You mean I'm going to go for a job, and you haven't hired anybody like me, ever. Why shouldn't you? I go to the front of the line once or twice or 5 times to get to where we need to go. So it shows it fair.
Okay, so gentrification is like what's happening in every major city in the country. They taking low income properties or properties that not even low income, just not as spruced up as what some white communities out there. They're taking the properties, they're paying off whoever owns them, they're knocking them down, and they're building it for white people. It's happening in Brooklyn, it's happening in Portland, it's happening in the West End, it's happening everywhere.
From instances like Ferguson, we've created more dialogue around the issue in addressing the root causes of racism. I feel like, you know, when things like incidents like Trayvon Martin and the Zimmerman case happens, you know, like they just point a finger at someone, but they don't want to get at the root cause of racism. I think we need to not only understand more about racism, but more about the psychology behind racism. Like I said before, it's been existing in this country, like our country was founded on it. And over time, that creates complicated dynamics that we're just so used to seeing that we kind of accept it. And it's kind of developing the social acumen and developing our own perspective so that we can see it and create systematic change.
So,
the school to prison pipeline is an analogy for taking kids directly from school and them ending up incarcerated. And you know, people often talk about the school to prison pipeline, which is very real, and I've seen it. And people now, the school is becoming a place that is like kind of racially profiling people, and it's so much worse now because now those kids are getting court summons. So now those kids are going, oh, right from school all the way to court, and it's just going like this, based on potentially the color of their skin. And that's because now there's police officers in the schools, and the police officers in the schools are another place where that could happen.
I was going back to school to get my doctorate in physical therapy when I stumbled across the social work world and started working with a lot of young people in Lewiston. And what made me put the pause on that and actually engage in social work and help minority youths in all across Maine is the fact that, you know, these were young people just like me who weren't given opportunities, who are so marginalized that they don't know how to use their voice to speak up and just discover themselves. So, you know, I walk around places like Lewiston, I walk around Portland, and I see all this talent, you know, and it goes to waste because we have just racism embedded inherently in like our structures in the juvenile justice system, in our school.
When I hear people talk about how minorities can be racist, I just think and to myself, like, what's racism actually? Isn't racism something that goes with power and prejudice? Minorities, most of the minorities don't have even power, the simplest and smallest power. How could they be racist? Maybe to each other.
Reverse racism is not real because usually when white people talk about reverse racism, the racial prejudice that they usually experience does not have the same weight of oppression behind it. So when people talk about, say, minorities become racist to one another, they're trying to diverge away from the real problem, and I think that it's important that people do not at all engage in the conversation that minorities are being racist to one another, because that's similar to saying, oh, so minorities are being racist to one another, so let's leave the situation as it is.
Is that we spend too much time fighting with each other, being a people of color. We spend too much time allowing people who are in control, think they're in control of us. We allow them to do that by falling into the trap of that they set that we fight with each other. The identity, that's a whole part of that. Knowing who you are, knowing who your neighbor is, and realizing that sometimes you need to sit and listen to what they say. They have to learn how to sit and listen. Back to the trust issue and learning how to communicate with each other and respect each other. We don't respect. First got to learn to respect yourself, and then you learn to respect your neighbor. You've got to learn to do that. We've got to learn to do that. And if we don't, the things that we're fighting now, they win. It isn't just about color. Okay? People forget that when today, there are people from all over the world that now live in, let's say, Portland, from all over the world. Many of them are treated the same way, despite color. They're treated the same way because they come from somewhere different. The other side of that is also religion. You know, there's so many different things that people can single out as an issue for the majority, okay? But on the reverse side of that, there's also the minority that has its own issues with each other and within the structure that they live in. I mean, I lived all over the world, so I come with a different view. When I lived in Thailand, the Thais don't like the Cambodians. The Cambodians don't like the Vietnamese. All three don't like the Chinese. Okay?
All life needs white supremacy, and white supremacy itself sustain on the unconscious action from those who benefit from it. So when I say Black Lives Matter, it's me saying that my lives matter and those who look like me, right? But then when someone say white, all lives matter, it's a way of them putting their hand and covering my mouth, right? And it's important to remember that all lives didn't matter to the founding fathers, right?
It is uncomfortable to talk about racism with everything that is happening, but I feel like it's so important that people understand it is more uncomfortable to live in a racially prejudiced society.
White privilege is just a privilege that other people don't have because they're not white. It's invisible. It's an invisible force, and they don't see it. And some of them do, some of them don't. And it's just, it just shows you like the reason why there's a lot of white people in power, or there's a lot of white people teaching me things about myself, is because there's a privilege there. It's a system of privilege. They have privilege and they have to own it. I don't expect white people to know white privilege exists. I don't expect them to know that, because it's like, it's something they have to want to learn about race first of all, and then they have to want to learn about all these institutions that are like oppressing other people.
Due to my work and my political beliefs and the college I went to, I live in liberal circles that exist, and I'm kind of aware of that. So a lot of people that I interact with aren't, and they're questioning it and they're trying to work on it. But I don't know, I can't speak for a majority of Americans. I mean, when I watch Fox News and I've been in other parts of the country, I went to school in Indiana, people were significantly more overtly racist, for sure. And I mean, I see it still here. So I don't know. I think that the majority of Americans need to work on race and talk about race.
My first experience with microaggressions and really understanding them, unpacking them, was at university. And since then, it's been a hot topic for me because it's something that I see so prevalent in so many fields. It's along gender lines and sexual orientation lines, but very specifically along race lines. And microaggressions are the just tiny, daily slights and injustices that happen over and over again, so much so that the person who's doing it has no idea they're doing it, and the person who's receiving it hears it not once, not twice, but thousands of times. And over time, this really builds up to be a much greater issue, a much larger structural problem in our society. And I think that understanding what's wrong with telling a person of color that they're very articulate and that somehow surprised you, really getting that what the underlying assumption is there is that they're not supposed to be somehow. So by saying something is good, it really is an insult.
Its infrastructure and its system is created off of slave owners. So it needs to evolve. It needs to change from the bottom up and from the top down. It needs to totally change. Police officers, I think, should be social workers. They should be on the front lines. They should be people out in the streets, and there needs to be more people of color as police officers. Police officers, the whole identity of police officer needs to change.
I think people shouldn't judge each other according to their skin color. Everyone should work together to fight racism.
I would like to say that it's really important to know and understand more about people who are different than you. I think that would alleviate a lot of problems and a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings that happen. And I think it's really important to kind of remove the judgment from a lot of things that we say about each other. Like, definitely making things less racially charged at times is helpful, and kind of having less of a us against them mentality. But ultimately, we all have to be able to kind of let go of whatever it is that makes us afraid.
One of the ways that I think we can do to minimize its effect on everyone and its evil and everything that comes with it is by getting people to talk to each other. People that have the ability to facilitate conversation between different groups need to create a platform where people can meet and talk to each other and get to understand who is my neighbor. And I don't think it's one group or the other group's responsibilities to learn about each other. I think that we need, as a society, as a community, we live next to each other, we need to learn about each other.
Yeah, I'd say, invest in our young people. Young people are exposed to, people with different ethnicities and backgrounds and experiences, and they're our leaders of tomorrow. And if you don't invest in young people, then we're just going to perpetuate the cycle.
Racism is something that happens in everyday life. Lots of people experience it, and lots of people are affected by it. We are trying to change racism. How are you affected by it?